What's up, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. This is Ryan Aranda here, my best life Paraguay. And today, I want to get deep on the topic, right? But yeah, I've been watching a lot of older shows that are kind of reality like type shows. I don't even know how they popped up in my YouTube algorithm. Even stuff like old Dr. Phil episodes, right? That kind of show like the family structures, young men and young women's issues in their teens, and then afterwards as young people, right? And it really brought me back because a lot of these are actually like literally line up exactly with my life, to the years, right? And so it got me thinking about society as a whole, right? Well, two things in particular: societal structure, and then also the phenomenon of not wanting to disappoint people, right? And I'm going to talk about this from the perspective of men, young men, and even boys, right? Um, so taking this all the way back to when we're, sorry, I'm going to be sipping a little bit of tea here, but taking this all the way back to when we're young kids, right? When we're young boys. Now, us millennials, we didn't really grow up with too much wokeness, hardly at all, right? So we were like in the last phases of relatively traditional, uh, for the most part, um, dynamics in the household. Um, but there were some exceptions, which I'll get into a little bit in a little bit here. But overall, like society was still like we were watching things on TV that like really made us want to do physical sports, for example, be the hero archetype when it comes to certain situations. Be strong and be confident and be a leader, right? Like those are things that really stuck out to us in shows, right? As young boys, right? Until later, it started getting all weird and messy and and like but even our cartoons were aligned with that stuff, like Power Rangers and all that. Like be the person with integrity, the hero, the one that saves the day and all that stuff, right? But then so we have this image of what we think we need to be, right? Whether we see it in our own households or not. But then there's the real world outside of that, of um, you know uh, portraying that and playing that stuff out, because the real world set up for generations, but certainly us millennials, and most certainly for even Gen Z and younger, a very feminized society, right? And that goes directly into our school system, right? So boys and girls learn different, right? I mean, it's not my opinion. That's literally fact. We do, right? Um, us boys, we need to be much more physically engaged in certain things, right? Conceptual, uh, you know, um, we need real life examples for things to make sense to us, especially when it comes to some of the mathematics and sciences and stuff, like sometimes numbers and all this by itself is extremely confusing for us. So, anyways, because we're stuck behind brick walls, learning in a classroom setting when we're extremely young, that's not the best setup for young boys, right? And then on top of that, uh, and I've had wonderful teachers, right? But the majority of your teachers are going to be female for most of us, right? So it's very rare to have a male teacher in K through 12. Um, and so, and again, this is seriously not to bash or teachers or uh, women in the teaching profession. I'm just saying this is just how it is, right? It's just how it's set up in society, right? So, we go to school and we're taught to stay still. We're taught to have to learn in literally like a meter by meter desk set up in front of us. All our creativity is literally bound to this little desk and what we can do with it, whether it's writing, reading, creating, etc. Right? Yeah, I guess we have things like music class and gym and all that, but for the most part, most of our teaching is being lectured at, right? And I always thought as a kid too, especially on like some of the best days in Wisconsin, like in the fall or the spring, where it's just perfect weather. I'm like, can we just please, for the love of God, take this outside? And there are actually some days that we did take some lessons outside because we had a school forest where I was growing up, right? But not enough though, right? Like, okay, yeah, you can't take it outside when it's freezing in the winter of Wisconsin, but those nice days for sure, right? And also too, you know, I'll pause actually real quick here. Okay, we're back. So yeah, so another part of that is uh, you know, being confined to this space where we're supposed to thrive and keep our grades up, uh, K through all the way through 12th grade, you know, in the same type of situation. Some of us make it, but a lot of young men don't, right? And we're not even talking about yet what goes on beyond the school building, right? But then on top of that, this is going to be controversial for me to say because I've never been able to really comprehend what a class for just boys and for just girls would look like. But I can certainly see the benefits, right? Because you gotta understand us, especially like in our preteens and stuff like that. Us boys are incredibly, incredibly distracted when it comes to uh, you know, girls our age. Heck, even a hot teacher. You know what I mean? To where like literally you could just lose a half an hour, 2 hours, right? Just being an idiot in your head, right? Um, and so like girls, they don't have that same incredibly deep. Oh yeah, they still have it, right? They giggle about the cute boy in class and all that kind of stuff, but like it's not as distracting for them as it is for us, right? And now, uh, you know, they're uh, there's some of these differences are starting to be realized, right? On a serious note, but I could actually see the benefits of splitting boys and girls up, right? And then bringing us together for whatever. But that kind of stuff can be extremely distracting. And not only that, but like even in high school, then the boys can start getting into fights and jealousy and all this kind of stuff too. Uh, so and then on top of that, when you're in America, you can wear whatever you want, right? Which goes for girls. So when you're a young kid, like any kind of thing that's revealing with a girl around your age, right? Is going to be extremely distracting. And then like here in Paraguay, when I started coming, I realized that like kids have uniforms, right? The whole like revealing situation isn't as big of a deal, because kids have uniforms. Everybody looks the same. It's not sexualized like the U.S., right? And then and then the teachers also have to be like on this like weird mom dad duty about like is this girl coming in too revealing and all this, and it just there's so many weird dynamics in the states, right, that are distracting and between boys and girls, and so anyways, that's just a huge long rant about the education system. But the point is that it's stacked against us boys, right? And then we look for outlets like sports, for example. um And sports and physical activity is arguably one of the best things you could possibly do, especially as a young man, to find your group community, build up your skills, your resilience, your body, all that good stuff. So they're good outlets. But the thing is now I'm going to talk about the home, but unless you have a really good coach that teaches you the deep meaning of some of these sports, camaraderie, uh, learning how to fail with grace, to lose with grace, learning how to win with grace, learning how to push ahead even when you want to quit, all those lessons, right? If they're not really teaching you that stuff, they need to be teaching you that stuff, right? Which is what I'll take it into now, the home conversation, right? So again, I'm talking about all the structures that are built up against guys that we don't even realize, right? Um, Most guys are growing up in some sort of feminized household, right? Even my generation, even if there is a mother and a father, so often the man, and I've seen this play out with multiple families, right? Um, will just immediately cede to the woman's last word when it comes to a lot of things. When it comes to punishments, when it comes to certain decisions, when it comes to schooling, when it comes to this sport that they should play or that sport, or should they sing or do this instrument or that instrument, or should it be, or should they join this or that, and so many times, or financial decisions in the household, even though many times the man is making more money, but for some reason, and this started with the boomers, right? I don't know if it's the flower generation and the we need to be equal on all levels, including final decision, which I don't understand, I guess, why, so many times it'll immediately go to the woman making the final decision in a lot of boomer households, right? But it's true. And I've seen this, right? Um, and through multiple races as well, right? But I think certainly for white folks. Um, but and I don't think that that's the best, especially when it comes to things when boys and teenage boys are involved, because there's the misconception that women are more empathetic and more sympathetic in general, right? Because I guess they feel feelings more better or something like that. I just don't think that's true though. I think that men, even though that men can be harsher on the outside, right, when it comes to certain pushing boys to be better, do more, in the really critical moments when boys start getting into trouble, boys start acting up a little bit, it's actually the men that have more empathy, right? But because so many of these last decisions, right, and I'll give you guys an extreme example. And I hate to bring this up, but one of my friends, if you guys don't know what one of these programs is, he got sent out to the state of Oregon, right, to do one of those military type, go out in the middle of the wilderness and like fix your attitude type things for a year, right? And again, I guess I don't know exactly whose decision that was, but you know, in that particular case, but far too often, a lot of those cases and a lot of those major decisions is usually made by a woman, actually, right? Um, because a man will want you to try to stick it out in the most uh I guess normal type of environment, right? Because you're gonna have to deal with normal type of environments, normal school, whether that school is good or bad, or that system is good or bad, most men are gonna want you to try to stick through what the normal situation is, right? Because there's not gonna always be exceptions to life, right? Most people are going to want you to try to stay in the most normalized version of work and a work schedule and work ethic and all that kind of stuff, right? So you see these weird dynamics play out in the household that that a lot of times women are given the last word when it comes to a lot of these things. And again, whatever, it's not to say, and I'm not making the argument that like men and women shouldn't be involved, especially if are a man and woman in the household, which is becoming more rare and more rare. But it's just really odd that a lot of the times the last decision goes and is deferred to the mother, right? And again, a lot of times there's a huge misconception of the mother's more sympathetic and empathetic, and maybe as a very young child that is true. But like in your teen years, that's when the father's empathy actually starts to kick in. Why? Because they remember how difficult it was for them, right? They understand the societal pressures that um, lead to things like mental health breakdowns for men and harsh suicide, right? And which is one of the last things I want to talk about too, with mixing in um, a very feminized society, right? And especially now, right, where a lot of things and it's starting to kind of creep back to normal. But here, one second, creep back to normal being meaning like I think some of the wokeness, the ultra wokeness, is starting to die down, which is good, right? Like, not all sports are toxically masculine. Not all men are toxically masculine. Um, you know, not all men are inherently evil. I remember one time, like my girl went such down the feminist path, right? That I literally just asked her. I asked her the question, do you think that women are morally superior to men? Do you think that women literally are more moral than men? Right? And she realized that if she were to answer that yes, how ridiculous of an answer that would have been, right? Because there's immoral and moral people on from both genders, right? So but as society as a whole, we're um, there's a big push in the 2010s to say that all men are these like absolute predators and we're all evil and we're all cheaters. And then when you actually broke the numbers down, it's like actually most women are actually cheating when it comes to these when it comes to marriages and that kind of stuff. So um, a lot of that was actually getting debunked in real time. So it was kind of hilarious, right? But anyways, so the mix of this whole feminized society, even if you do grow up in a two parent household kind of deal, right? Um, and especially you're extra screwed if you grew up in a single mother household. I mean, I didn't even get to that, but that's actually most people's realities these days, right? And that's the worst, right? Because at least with the example I was given before, which a lot of boomer moms had the last word in a lot of things, right? Or in pretty much most things. um, what's 10 times worse than that is when there is no father present at all, right? And that's everything plays into that, meaning more likely to get in trouble with the law, lower grades, lower attention span, lower ability to uh, perform. Go down the line, So you mix all that stuff in, and then you mix in the factor of young boys and young men and teenagers and men of all ages. We don't want to disappoint anybody, right? And we carry this from such a young age, right? Because it comes back to the thing I was talking about in the beginning. We have these ideas of what we want to be, right? And there's pretty much no uh, strain from that, right? For me, right, for my dad it was Batman, right? For that was his favorite superhero, but my favorite superhero was Spider Man, right? And some of the lessons that came out of this some of those first movies, right? Before they got all crazy and woke, and there's 10,000 versions, right? But anyways, but um, you know, so you have a good idea of the kind of person you want to be from a young age, right? And if you don't stay on that timeline, or if you feel like you're not strong, you're not smart enough, you're not performing well enough, you're not the best on the team, you're not making your family happy, maybe you're getting into some trouble, right? Maybe your parents said something that made you think that they're very disappointed in you, right? And we carry that so internally, right? And I'm gonna mention a story here, and it does have to do with self deletion, right? But here, one second. Okay, so in high school, me and my brother and my sister were part of a youth group, right? And there's a young man around 1 year older than me. Great kid, great kid, extremely active and athletic, good looking, charismatic for a young kid too. Like literally, he was. And I remember I actually looked up to him. I was like, dang, he's really good with the girls. Like, he's super like athletic, and so was I. But like, he was like genuinely strong, like without even like having to go to the weight room type stuff. It was like in his genetics, right? Tall kid, handsome, a good speaker. He even had like like really strict, really strict, like schedules, like for himself, right? To even as a teenager for like self improvement and stuff. And to make a long story short, he took his life in high school, right? Rest in peace, Seeger. I'll say his name, right? Um, and there was a situation that happened where he felt that he disappointed um, his parents, right? And the reason I bring that up is because I felt that way too. I've certainly felt that way when I was young, when I started getting a little bit in trouble in high school and after high school, even. Um, and uh, and every time I felt that I disappointed my parents, I felt that I needed to I needed to step away from them and build myself up to become better and show up in weeks, months, years. Oh, I've never went years without talking to my parents, but there's these huge gaps in time when I just remember that, that you know that I just wanted to be better. But the next time I would talk with them, uh, give them an update, made them sure I learned my lesson, that kind of stuff, right? Um, so that goes with the family thing, and it never stops, right? It doesn't stop when you're a son, when you're a brother, when I'm not a father, but I can imagine when I'm a father, you don't want to ever disappoint your family. Um, and well, I'm an uncle, right? So I never wanted to disappoint my niece and my nephew either, or my sister, or my brother, or my sister and my brother in the States, right? I always wanted um to never have feel any of that shame, So yeah, and so and then beyond family, that goes also with your romantic relationships, right? You don't want to disappoint your partner, and you don't want to disappoint your friends. You don't want to disappoint anybody, right? And so, yes, it may seem that these are two random topics, right? But where I guess I'll tie these into is that because because we're inherently gonna take disappointment, or disappointing others very personally as young men, right? And then we have a society that's set up to not exactly benefit us, right, to say the least. Which I could still go in for hours and hours and hours on end about that, but you know, just giving you a little bit of context from younger ages, right? And then most likely get in a couple of failed relationships where a lot of us find ourselves simping or whatever, because again we feel like we don't want to disappoint the our partner, uh so we do simpy things even though we shouldn't, right? So there's a whole mess of things going on that could lead to our demise, right? This feeling of needing to be perfect, of not letting anybody down, of not disappointing anybody, right? And and then a society on top of that. And from a young age, we're very distracted. We don't know what's going on, and not only that, but this is where I'll get into the last part of it. Is so what do we do about it, right? Um, Us guys like me talking about this. This is part of the solution. Talking openly about it and hoping that young men will listen, right? The only person that you should be worrying about disappointing is yourself. Number one, right? Your own timeline, your own goals, your own this and your own that. That's number one, right? Number two is realizing that you will never change society, right? Like our schooling system is a very European one that's going to probably be here for the rest of time. It's not going anywhere. We're not going back like learning like the natives did, which I literally used to dream about. Like, wow, I wonder how it used to be 500 years ago, right? When you're actually like learning survival skills year round, right? It's never going back to that, right? Maybe in very, very few cases for 0.00001% of people. Also, you're not going to change the fact that most likely, um, you're going to have a lot of distractions when you're young, whether it be, being in classes with the opposite sex, all that kind of stuff, right? Um, and also, for adults who are adults now, like myself, you can't count on just being an example. You really need to talk to young men. You need to explain to young men and literally with words explain, this is how you treat a woman. This is how you go about your life. This is how you go about um overcoming this. Because the thing is, for the boomers, right? They thought that we were just going to learn by example, but the thing is, we're not mature enough to learn by only by example. A lot of us, yeah, it's arguably the most important thing, but right behind leading by example is also explaining, right? Like, do you want to leave a legacy behind one day? This is the importance of a legacy. This is the importance of having a family. This is the importance of not getting into trouble. This is the importance of realizing that you know your circle is going to be smaller and smaller and smaller one day, so you don't need to please everybody. This is the importance of a relationship dynamics, and how to go about relationship dynamics, and not take everything so personal and feel resentment, and maybe even vengeance and fury when things don't go your way when it comes to relationships and that kind of thing, right? Like, you don't want to be fighting over girls, that kind of thing, when you're really young too, But the thing is, like, they never talked to us about any of that stuff, right? Sure, they led by silent example, but us guys, we need more than that. We need to have heard it, right? And that's where I really actually, I give it to the black community too. That especially the older men, I learned a lot from older men from the black community, right? Because they don't bullshit at all. Like they'll tell it straight up. Like, yeah, man, this is where you f up. This is where you don't f up. Don't do this. Like, this is gonna be bad if you do that. You know what I mean? But the majority of like of mainstream society, white society, and even a lot of Hispanic households, Hispanic is kind of is somewhere in the middle, I think, right? When it comes to the whole like leading by example versus talking about the importance of what you should do and not do, right? And just deeper ideologies, right? It really depends, right? But the most I guess liberal, and I don't mean like woke liberal. I just mean like base liberal household in America, or even conservative for that matter, was just teach by example. But again, the point of all this is because there's so many factors internal that we need to be perfect, not let anybody down. Plus a society that doesn't build us up as men. We need those extra conversations to be happening from a young age, right? So we can lower these self deletion numbers. We can lower the numbers of feeling extremely depressed and anxious and like we're failures. Excuse me. Excuse me. And feeling like we're failures as a young boys, not performing well enough in school and sports with women. We're not the most popular. We're not the most talented in this music or that music or singing or dancing or whatever, and it helps. It helps a ton. Some of the best things I remember as a youth are the deep conversations that older men would have with me that looked like me, that would honestly just cut the bullshit about being an older adult, and instead of on their high horse, just be relatable, right? That's why, like, um, I don't know what it is, man, but I kind of to younger folks, I actually kind of give off of a more like youthful vibe than your average 34-year-old, right? Because I talk openly about this stuff, right? And I do have things like a YouTube channel, which they think is cool, right? But there's a lot of people my age who are just old heads, man. They're just like the last generations, right? They think the exact same way. But me, I try to break through some of this nonsense, dude, about like, you know, lead by example only. It's like, no, let's have the deep conversations. We have to save men, to save society, to save ourselves, to save our sanity. You know what I mean? So hopefully all this made sense, man. um, yeah, there's a lot of cards stacked up against us, right? Um, and there's a lot of weird dynamics, right? That us, especially us who move abroad and live in other societies and cultures, are able to determine: do I really want to continue that Western mindset of this that I didn't really like, of this that I didn't really like, or this that does work, but only to this level, or that kind of stuff, right? You want to deeply think about it, man, because you don't want to make some of the same mistakes and be overly harsh or be overly silent, right? Or and just think that your kid's just gonna understand stuff, right? Because they're not, especially young guys, right? Um, young girls take a lot of things personally, but young guys take things to a devastating level, right? Of self harm, of this, of that, right? And it's extremely sad, right? So, anyways, I know it's a kind of a dark topic, but hopefully it made sense, and hopefully that maybe just maybe there's some younger folks out there who are kind of stuck. Like I always try to talk to younger folks too, especially young guys, about their issues, right? About understanding why they may be going through some of the stuff that they're going through, right? Instead of seeking bad outlets or vengeance or resentment or rage or whatever against society, that just realize that it's an unfair society that's stacked up against you. It's literally from the education system to maybe the household dynamics to this and that you know that arguably set you up for failure, right? But if you stick in there, you open your heart and you open your mind and you listen to people who have actually been through stuff, who are willing to talk about their past, their mistakes, and the positive, and not just paint you an Andrew Tate picture like everything's just wonderful at all times, like, and try to be an empathetic and sympathetic human being, right? Um, Especially once you reach my age or become older, then now it's your turn to understand the next generation behind you. Don't just think that you have all the answers, because a lot of times you were brought up in an environment that wasn't correct for you either. You know what I mean? And last thing too, I'll harp on this one last time, but um, women are not more sympathetic and empathetic, especially when it comes to men's struggles, right? They don't understand, right? And a lot of times it'll be to shame us and to kick us when we're down, when we're already struggling, and say, and then that kind of stuff makes us not want to work out relationships. That kind of stuff uh, makes us not maybe rebel when we're younger, when we're older, maybe not want to talk to family. Um, you know, I'll also go up about the whole like pull yourself up by the bootstraps, kid. That can be men and women. It's not just men who think like that, right? It's an entire older generation that's like, well, I did it, then you just do it. you know, the exact same way. You know, I think literally the smartest people are those who are able to not only think about historical philosophies and how that applies to life, but also seeing the changes, the changes in society, the real life, real moment changes are happening now, occurring now. That have a great effect on young people, because at the end of the day, young people are the future. Young people are going to save this world. They're going to determine whether your legacy even carries on or not. Whether however you may look at your legacy, if they're going to continue it or not. Were you a decent person? Were you empathetic? Did you try to understand? And I'll end it there. This is Ryan Aranda, my best life Paraguay. Going in on some deep stuff, but that's me, man. I like to contemplate some of this stuff and, just see if we can try to do better, including myself, Okay. Anyways, much love. Take care of yourselves, you guys. I'll see you on the next one. Peace.